Hi, Bill. Welcome to Better with Age. How are you doing?
Hi, Stefan. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Great. So perhaps let's start with understanding a little bit more about you. Tell us about your background as an athlete. Where did you start?
I'd say all of us athletes start at conception and we get our DNA, and that actually is a pretty big determinant of your ceiling, the upper end of how far you can go. So as much as we'd like to think I can go as far as I want with hard work, there are certain genetic predispositions to having great endurance, great power, great sprint. So we get our mitochondrial DNA from our mother, and I can thank my mom, I think, for having a lot of mitochondria, which produce energy and aerobic metabolism. I seem to have a lot of endurance and mitochondria, so I'm thankful for my mom for that. My earliest memories of athletics are in the neighborhood. I grew up in New Jersey, lots of neighborhood kids the same age. I was the one to knock on everybody's door, get everybody together. We're going to play baseball, football, basketball, stickball. We had some also interesting contests. We would throw rocks at each other in the street. We would get a pile of rocks. Who does that now, right? 20 feet apart, you got your pile of rocks and you throw it. And invariably, I was the one to get hit in the head. My scalp would bleed like crazy. My mother would say, "We're taking him to the hospital." My father would say, "He's fine." Bloody towel. But that was the end of that game. And we did it until I got hit 3 or 4 times in the head. So I guess I wasn't
sort of hardcore.
Yeah, that was hardcore. And I guess I wasn't very good at dodging rocks. And then I came up with this brilliant idea of going up to the elementary school. They had a big field. We'd bring our bow and arrows, 6 of us, 8 of us, shoot the arrows in the air, try to shoot them kind of straight up, wait until they start to come down, and then run away and try not to get hit by an arrow. And you learn to run very fast. And it was kind of exciting. Arrows coming down. Nobody got hit. And that was kind of a fun, different sort of athletic event. And then there was a lot of fighting, just kids, neighborhood kids. I was always the skinniest and scrawniest, so I learned my stand-up game was not going to match up to somebody bigger than me. But if I took somebody down, I was really wiry. I could straddle them and say, "Do you give up?" And every time they gave up, so I never actually had to hit somebody. So yeah, the kind of MMA started back in New Jersey in like the early 70s with my neighborhood. And then I was climbing trees, climbing ropes. At age 8, I taught myself the unicycle. I had stilts. Went to high school. I was a pole vaulter, a swimmer, a diver, cross-country runner. We had a weight room. I never liked the powerlifting. I didn't like the barbells. It didn't feel good to me. So I did my own thing, circuit training, calisthenics, gymnastics, similar to what I do now. No weights. I haven't touched a weight since high school. And that was freshman year. And it didn't feel good to me. College, I was a swimmer, a diver. I later got into triathlons when I graduated. Went to Michigan State University, did triathlons every weekend, swim, bike, run. Moved out to Sun Valley, Idaho in 1988, drove out my little Tercel with a bike and fell in love with Nordic skiing. And I remember as a kid being in my cellar doing pull-ups and push-ups, 8 years old, 9 years old, wondering, what is wrong with me? Why am I doing this? Why am I making myself suffer? And I thought, someday this is going to make sense. This is going to be worth it. And I got on my skate skis. When I moved out here, I'm like, this is why I love the feeling of my whole body skate skiing. I'm outside in nature, not in a pool. And I kind of found my soul sport and tried a biathlon that winter, won this little pellet gun biathlon, got into summer biathlon in the summers, run and shoot. I won a couple local races, which won me a mountain bike. I'm like, this is cool. I did a winter biathlon, went to the nationals. With less than a year of skiing, I was at the Olympic trials, and I ended up skiing okay, but missed too many shots, just barely missed the Olympic team, which was okay. I wasn't supposed to make the team. There were people there who deserved to make it. The summer biathlon, I ended up finishing went to the nationals. I had a second place and third place at the summer nationals, run and shoot. So I had some good results there. And then in the past, since the 92 Olympic trials, just lots of different sports in the mountains, hiking, biking, running, gravel races, just lots of ways to have fun in nature.
You said in there that you ask yourself the question, why do you make yourself suffer? So it prompts me to ask you, what is it that has driven you to endure what you have in order to break some world records, so many world records? So what is it that makes you do it?
I think for me, and this is different from my wife, who had a wonderful upbringing, and her father was her friend, her mentor. He introduced her to everything. They did it together. My father was my personal bully. He was an alcoholic. He was very demeaning to me and verbally abusive, treated me like an imbecile. So I had like zero self-confidence as a kid. I had a heightened sense of shame and insecurity that I was kind of worthless. Why would my father be wrong? I didn't know alcohol affected that, or I just thought I'm an idiot. So I think a lot of it was proving to myself that maybe I can be good at something. Maybe I'm not that smart, but I can be good at something physical. Maybe it was an outlet too for the angst in the dysfunctional family. There was no love in the family. It was extremely dysfunctional, with my father drinking all day, all night, crashing cars. It wasn't good, but in retrospect, it made me so insecure that I had to work harder for everything.
Okay.
And physically, I would punish myself maybe for feeling like I wasn't worthy of anything. So I would just really work hard as a little kid on everything, and try to develop some sense of self-worth through physical activities, because maybe I wasn't smart in other areas, even though I was, but I was convinced I wasn't. So I put my angst and my energy into physical things.
And here we are decades later, and you're still driving yourself. So is it still self-worth that you're chasing, or is it something else?
I think at this point, it's what makes me tick. I've always been like a monkey, a lot of energy and moving. I don't sit still very well. We'll be lucky if I can stay in this seat the whole time. Just a lot of energy. So that's naturally who I am. And I also think my wife thinks it was a blessing, my upbringing. Wouldn't trade it for the world. I don't recommend it, but it served me well in getting me to work harder at everything and overthink and overdo and overcheck everything, because in my brain, I'm inherently flawed, and I'm not very smart, and I'm not a good athlete. I'm not good at anything. So I make myself work harder. And I think that carried on into adulthood, where I triple check, triple test everything, because I don't want to be the idiot.
Okay. So the mindset of is to keep making sure you're okay.
The mindset of discipline, I mean, that comes, especially if I have goals, it comes easily, but even without goals, I'm still going to train. I'm still going to get myself to that place of endorphins. My whole family was drug addicts or alcoholics. So somehow I was so repulsed. Everybody smoked. I was surrounded by secondhand smoke until I was 18 and left the house, and drunk and problems. And I'm like, I don't want that. I'm going to do this. And nobody in my family was athletic. So I went this other way, and it's become how I tick.
At the same time, it would be wrong to think of you only as somebody who has reverted to the physical because of those things that you described, because you've got some pretty impressive qualifications as well.
Yeah, I mean, I became very fascinated and intrigued with the whole physical thing, the fitness thing, the performance thing, and the body and how it works. And so, yeah, I went to college thinking I wanted to be a doctor, a sports medicine doctor, did all the prerequisites for medical school, all the science, which a lot of it I didn't like, the chemistries and the lab. But in retrospect, it was a good foundation for then going to grad school in exercise physiology, where I got specifically into what I love: biomechanics, kinesiology, physics, physiology, how everything works and how can things be optimized better. In grad school, I worked with the cross-country running team for my thesis, the max testing. I did hundreds of tests and had dozens of tests on me, lactate testing. So I know what that's like. I know what it is to test somebody. I know what it is like to be tested. I know what it means because I did that. And then more importantly is, like, somebody has a degree, you studied for 4 years, or the master's was 2 years. Cool, you got a degree, but then what? Like, so it's after that that I continue to study, and I continue to spend 2 or 3 hours a day looking at the scientific literature, studying the physics, the biomechanics, different videos, different coaches, pulling all this information from the sciences and different sports into my methodology.
Okay.
And
you describe it almost like engineering, actually, in some ways. What drove you to start coaching?
I will address that. Don't forget about the engineering thing, because I want to get into engineering. We'll come back to that. Remember that engineering thing. What drove me to get into coaching was I was kind of naturally a coach. I was getting the kids together, making teams, always learning some new physical feat, the stilts, the unicycle, the climbing the rope, walking on my hands. We'd have handstand walking races. Like, who does that now? I could walk across the gym and back on my hands, and like just weird things like that. And I would end up teaching other kids how to perform these weird things and hit the ball better or throw the ball better, because I somehow had this innate understanding of how the human body works better than most. So I naturally kind of ended up coaching even as a kid. In high school, I did that unique sort of resistance training, ended up coaching some kids in high school who didn't want to do the traditional stuff. Same happened in college. And then out here, I've been doing my own fitness training and coaching business for the past 40 years.
And what does coaching other people do for you personally? What do you get from it?
It's a way for me to share what I know. I mean, any opportunity I get, and probably you get, and hopefully a lot of people get, to make somebody's day or improve their quality of life or help them get more fit, help them get to another level of performance. Know that they got a PB or a record, and they call me and we get on a chat and they're so happy. I can share that happiness. So it's a multiplier for achievement. I get this vicarious thrill that's probably more than my own stuff, because your own stuff, you're like, I did it, and your wife's like, good job, and that's it. Yeah. Whereas with other people that you're collaborating with and they do it, it's like, oh, Glenn did his best. He broke 130 at the British Championships, and I get the chills thinking about it, and I get this huge. I'm high all day from seeing my people.
So in that case, what makes a good coach?
What makes a good coach? I took some notes on this because I think there's a common misconception. Maybe with so much free coaching available, you could YouTube anything. I think a lot of people think coaching is if you do a sport or you study it a little bit or you wrote in college, you can be a coach. You know some things about engineering, or anybody can be a coach. And the reality is anybody can, okay? But anybody can have an opinion. But I think to be a really good coach takes 3 things. You got to be a student, a scientist, and a coach, like a full-time coach. And the student thing is you've got to be obsessed with studying and learning. And so you have a deep understanding. Coaches only see what they understand. So when a coach looks at an athlete doing something, they only see what they understand. So the more you understand, the more you can see with every joint in the body and I have a superpower of seeing efficiency or inefficiency, and this isn't right, that's not right. I've done this my whole life. So studying, being an obsessive academic student, also being a student as an athlete, being in the trenches, doing the sport, doing the intervals, doing the races. There's no substitute for doing that work. I wouldn't be half the coach if I wasn't in the trenches as an athlete, learning and trying to optimize. I've got a great quote here that you'll love. And okay, here it is. A teacher can never truly teach unless he is still learning himself. A lamp can never light another lamp unless it continues to burn its own flame. The teacher who has come to the end of his subject, who has no living traffic with his knowledge, but merely repeats his lesson to his students, can only load their minds, he cannot quicken them. So I'm a much better coach as an academic student, as a student athlete. And then also a great coach needs to be a scientist. It's easy to have an opinion. I don't care. I want to hear people's opinions. I will have an opinion, but ultimately it's evidence. I want evidence, not somebody's opinion. Why is that better? And I get asked all the time, and I want to know why. And my own opinions would be a hypothesis, and I'm going to test it, and I'm going to retest it, and I'm going to continue to test and experiment. So you kind of need to be an obsessive scientist to be a great coach, constantly testing what's better.
Yeah, and you clearly bring a lot of passion to all of those things as well, which it makes it compelling and drives you on.
Yeah, I mean, this is my life's work. I calculated roughly 30,000 hours studying as an academic after college, roughly 30,000 hours of training in the trenches, learning different sports, and roughly 60,000 hours of coaching. To be a great coach, you've got to coach. It can't be a hobby. Like, to be a great pilot, you don't want to fly with somebody who's piloting as a hobby.
Yeah.
You want them to be a full-time pilot, because everybody's a good pilot or a good coach until somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
And half the battle is just not hurting people. Yeah. How do you get better without hurting particularly old bodies? And that's a big part of my success as a full-time trainer, is making people measurably better. And that's easy to do on the ERG, because here's your splits. It's so objective. So people know if they're getting better or not, and then getting better without getting hurt.
Okay. Okay. We'll come back to that with the older aspect. In your promotional material, you talk about the need to be open-minded. What do you mean by that?
So I think being open-minded in any aspect of our life is super important. It's probably the cornerstone of success and continuing to evolve as a human, as an athlete, being receptive to new information, being receptive to change, to progress. And it's really the only way to improve. And I've got these 4 traits, the 4 horsemen of stagnation. So most people are their own worst enemies when it comes to getting better, and they get stuck with these 4 traits. The first one is cognitive dissonance, where incoming information hurts the brain.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to hear anything new that hurts. I just want to do my own thing, which is fine, but you're not going to be good coachable material. And then the next would be Dunning-Kruger effect, where everybody I work with is smart. They're an expert in their field, but don't think that because you're an expert in that field that you're necessarily an expert in the fitness field, and that you might need to defer to me being the expert or your coach in the field to get to another level. So if you think you're the expert in the field and you know everything, it's going to be hard to advance. Confirmation bias is only accepting information that confirms your beliefs, your bias, and not wanting the new information. And having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset is going to keep you where you're at. So all those 4 things will keep you stuck exactly where you're at. And you're not going to change much if you're stuck and you've got the 4 horsemen living in your head, preventing you from changing, adding and deleting and moving forward. So coaching isn't for everyone, and that's okay. But I believe that it's the only real way for most people to truly unlock their full potential. And I believe that most athletes, particularly rowers, because of the paradigm, are underperforming to a pretty big degree, which is why I've been able to take 26 rowers and get over 100 world, British, and American records. They were underperforming by 10 or 50%. They had been rowing for years at a certain level, and now they're 10 to 50% better. That shows they were underperforming. And they get a coach, and all of a sudden they're at another level.
So I'm interested in the relation of that point to another point which we discussed before briefly, which is that you said something to me about it's not always good to stick to a rigid training plan. It's worth considering that you be guided by what your body is telling you. Talk a little bit about
this is good, and this gets back to the engineering. Like, building a house is complicated. Building a house from the ground up, foundation, wires, it's complicated. It's hard. There's a lot going on. There's walls. There's all this stuff. There's plumbing, electricity. Everything has to be perfect. It's complicated to build a house from the ground up, but there is a rigid plan designed by the architect and the engineers. You follow that rigid plan, you will have a perfect house. Okay. Human beings are not complicated. They're complex. They're fundamentally complex. There is no rigid plan for elevating the performance of a human. There's so many variables, and there's no rigid plan even for one person. It needs to be a flexible dance, I like to say. So with any training plan, you're always dancing between stress and recovery, stress and recovery. It's not a rigid thing. It's every day. It's a little dance. I'm tired today. I feel good today. Stress, recovery, stress, recovery. When that's in balance, you'll get better with the right training and with the right technique. Too much stress, not enough recovery is called torture. Right? That's no fun. You're torturing yourself with this rigid plan. This heart rate, I'm going to hit these splits no matter what. 8 500s every week. Rigid. I'm going to hit it. You're going to die. That's not the way to get better. So it's not a rigid thing. And in every workout, it's a dance between my perceived exertion. What am I seeing on my physiological dashboard? What's my blood pH, acid level? What's the acid level in my quads, my arms? How's my breathing rate? I'm feeling like I'm getting out of breath. What's my stroke doing? There's so many things to tune into other than heart rate. And when we race, the heart rate doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how high your heart rate is. It's not a heart rate contest. It's how many watts can I sustain? So really every workout, I'm thinking about how do I do this dance of maintaining perfect stroke mechanics with what my body is telling me about the acidity level, about my breathing rate, what's going on with my brain. Am I close to getting the switch flipped to shut me down because cerebral deoxygenation has happened greater than 10%, which is like fainting. And there's a switch that goes off and it's like, oh my God, I'm stopped. Well, that wasn't even voluntary. Your brain didn't get enough oxygen and it shut you down. Am I close to that happening? I'm kind of feeling that happening. What do? And you practice that over and over again. So it's not about heart rate. It's not just about hitting the split at a heart rate and muscling it. It's about how do I do the dance with the splits I need to hit.
And I haven't counted how many times you've referred to dance, but you use it a lot. And I know that you are an advocate of a variety of movement. You refer to that quite often as well. So is the dance, is the variety, is that part of listening to the body's needs rather than just the rigid plan?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just, there's, keep your back rigid, stabilize your core, row like a robot, have your core like a turtle shell. Be rigid. No. That's not how the human body works. We want to round and retract. There's a lot of power in the round and unround. We want the finish movement to be different from the start movement. We don't want just this stable platform that's weak, that's bad, which is why you won't see any of the top world-class athletes. You'll see them all rounding. They don't have perfectly straight backs. You're sucking if your back is perfectly straight and you're stabilizing your core. So really, just being as relaxed as you can be, whatever sport you're in, you're going to see the best athletes are the most relaxed.
Okay.
And the only way you can get to a high level is learning how to do your sport with less muscle, more bounce, more elasticity.
Yeah. And how is the science for older athletes developing?
Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab a little seal here.
You're dancing.
And I'll come back to these, but this, you remember these?
Yeah. They were banned when I was at school, Bill.
They're still banned. I got these on the black market. I actually got them on Amazon, but they're highly illegal. So these balls are just elastically dancing with each other without a whole lot of energy. They just elastically collide and then bounce. And that's a good thing. This is a tensegrity structure of the spine, and we're just a bunch of rubber bands connected together on these slippery surfaces, more slippery than ice. And these rubber bands have recoil properties. So we're just a bunch of rubber bands, and on the slides, we're combining with their rubber bands and just trying to bounce around and dance. So you asked me about
about older athletes and how the science for exercise for older people is developing.
So if we want to talk about developing, let's talk about where we were first and how we've developed from there. So if we go back 2,000 years ago to the Romans, average lifespan was 35. They were brushing their teeth with a frayed stick, dipping it in charcoal and ash, and they were rinsing with urine. Dog urine, human urine. Well intentioned, but not ideal. And for fitness, they were lifting weights and doing cardio. So 2,000 years later, our oral hygiene for 1/2 of our body has evolved. We don't no longer use a stick in ash. We no longer rinse with urine. So we've really evolved our oral hygiene to take care of 1/2 of our bodies. And yet people are still thinking of fitness as, I lift weights and do cardio. I'm good. Well, that's what the Romans did 2,000 years ago. It's better than nothing, but it's not the best. So lifting weights and cardio, good, but there's other things we can do. So there's what I refer to as the 6 dimensions of fitness. You could call them the 6 pillars of fitness that support the fitness house, the functional health house. And these 6 pillars of fitness are like the 6 teeth of fitness that need to be brushed and flossed every day. So we know strength is important, but not just one-dimensional strength. We're talking about multi-dimensional strength. The body moves in 6 dimensions, front to back, side to side, up and down, sideways, forward, rotary. And we want to train all 6 dimensions with resistance. And the body doesn't just respond to weight, which is gravity-based. It responds to elastic resistance, centrifugal force, body weight. So really what moves the body forward is time under tension, not weight, but time under tension. 20, 30, 40 reps is enough to build hypertrophy and muscle mass. So we want multidimensional power, not just strength. The ergometer measures power, how quickly you move. So it's not just moving slowly. You see people doing these heavy, slow things that you're not building function there. So you want to build functional strength. Stamina, having a high VO2 max is super important for longevity. The core, not as a plank, not as a turtle shell, but as an intelligent rotary engine to produce torque and counter torque what the legs are doing. Coordination is super important, prevent you from falling. we see lots of people come to us from CrossFit or Navy SEALs, and they're really strong. They can squat this and bench this, but they can't move. They're uncoordinated. So it's like, what's the point of having all the strength and power if you can't move and coordinate and do different movement patterns? So having a high kinesthetic IQ, at the very least, will prevent you from falling, breaking a bone, which is catastrophic as we get older. Muscle mass and bone density, super important. Maintaining muscle mass is time under tension, not just weights. Bone density, two best things for bones are twisting and jolting forces. Tennis players have great bones. Accelerate, decelerate, and lots of twisting forces. Interestingly, I study tennis players. The dominant arm, 25% more bone density from gripping. Okay. And then they also found 25% more bone density in the humerus of the dominant arm, more than the other arm. And they're like, the humerus bone isn't gripping. How did that get more dense? All the twisting, twisting the bones. So all the twisting movements that we do at hardcore increase bone density as much as if you're going to lift heavy weights to get bone density, they have to be really heavy, and you're probably going to get hurt. So there's better ways to build bone density. Last but not least is mobility. Dynamic stretching movements that keep everything lubricated. Motion is lotion. You see so many people now frozen up here in this kyphotic because this is our position, and you get frozen up there versus being able to dance.
Okay.
So yeah, those 6 dimensions are super important. When was the last time you didn't brush your teeth?
A long time ago.
Can't remember. Okay. When was the last time you did all 6 dimensions of fitness in one workout or one day?
Also can't remember.
So we were really good at brushing our teeth. It's a habit. The Dental Association got us into that habit. God forbid we don't brush our teeth. But these 6 dimensions of fitness that are super important for the rest of our body, I'll do it another time. I'm going to skip this. So every exercise we do incorporates 6-dimensional movement and 6-dimensional fitness. So we'll see people 2, 3, 4 times a week, and we want to maximize that time to elevate all 6 dimensions of fitness at the same time. So you're brushing and flossing your body, not just your teeth.
Okay, very interesting and point well made. How do you start with someone coming to you for the first time?
Super hard, super aggressive. I'm kidding. Try to intimidate.
I've heard about the video.
Yeah. So basically, I work with people of all sizes, ages, abilities, and it's real important for me to meet them where they're at, not where I'm at. Everybody has a different history, injuries, training, body types, more of a sprinter, more of an endurance, and see where they're at, where they want to go, and then map out the best way to get there safely and effectively. So for a rower, it would start with let's see where you're at with a 1K time trial.
Okay. And
just do a solid effort for 1Ks, and we're going to see your pace. And then I'll want to see a video of that 1K pace, and look at the video in freeze frames at 4 different parts of the drive. And then I want a force curve at that 1K pace. And that's really the key, is to marry the force curve to the video, because the force curve will tell you more than what you see in the video. So in the video, you may see, it looks perfect to me. Catch, finish position, you're moving the handle, looks good to me. But you look at the force curve and you see this gradual progression, and then it peaks, then it comes right down. You're like, not good. You're missing out on a ton of power. You're not optimizing that 0.6 seconds of the drive. So you've got 0.6 seconds to accelerate the flywheel, keep it there, and then next stroke, please. So in a perfect world, you're at peak force the whole time, but we have to take these little breaks and come in and grab it again. So I've never met someone with a perfect force curve. I've never worked with someone starting with a perfect force curve, not even close. But by and it depends on the person, but everybody improves their force curve so they're becoming more efficient in the drive. And that's improved by body positioning, by an understanding of, am I just moving and yanking on the handle? I'm like, no, we're looking to affect the behavior of the flywheel. We've got to accelerate the flywheel to a high velocity and sustain it.
And so do you find, I don't know if this is a thing or not, but do you find that people come to you and they've got a health goal and they've got an event goal and they may be in conflict? Somebody says, I want to lose 5 kilos or something, and at the same time they want to do 2,000 meters, and you say, actually, maybe there's a smarter way of doing this.
Yes, that happens. I'm trying to think of a great example, but yeah, sometimes there is some conflict there. I'm not thinking of a specific example, but I want to hear all your goals. I want to lose weight. I want to be an overall athlete too, and I want these 6 dimensions of fitness, but I also want to break the 1-minute world record. And I might try to talk someone out of a high risk proposition. That's a lot of force. I'm not doing anything less than a K. It's just for me to get down into 120 pace at 160 pounds. I feel like I'm on the verge of what my tissues can handle, and it's not worth it for me to get injured. So I know my limitations, and like somebody will say, I don't need to train for a marathon. I'm just going to do it. I'm like, no, you're not going to be on there for 3 hours and just do it. You're going to have issues, your neck, your back, and you don't want long-term issues from being a hero one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Your approach to coaching is much more intimate and detailed than I think many people are used to, because older athletes who perhaps were coached, many years before doing whatever they did, a lot of what people called coaching was more supervised practice than actually anything that was truly analytical and prescriptive.
That is a great point. And a lot of the coaches, they're super smart, awesome people, and they are really good at what they do, getting kids in boats, you're in this seat, getting them to the meets, a lot of logistics and planning. A lot of them, I would say the vast majority, aren't doing what I'm doing. They're not in the trenches as an athlete. They're not studying biomechanics and physiology, kinesiology every day. They're not even necessarily trying to change the technique indoors. Just row and try to hit these splits. They're not technicians necessarily. Or if they are, they're not necessarily keeping it fresh and learning themselves and constantly evaluating subtle little things in every joint of the body that might influence power production. And so I'm at a different level than the average coach, like you said, is not so much a technician. And I know a lot of the coaches, high school and college, they're not really, like even Eric Murray said, we don't really get coached on technique on the erg. We just pull. Yeah. We just do whatever technique we do on the erg. On the water, it's a little different. But that's a really good point that I'm all about. The technique is the biggest area of improvement for pretty much any athlete. And that's where I've seen the biggest improvements from the people I work with in a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, to see 10, 20, 30% improvements. It's not fitness. It's how you distribute power throughout the drive. It's what you're doing with the flywheel, what you're doing with your movement. And a lot of people are moving, but they're not doing the right things in the movement. This is not just about moving. I mean, I could actually sit on the rower and I could convince you that I'm rowing at a pretty high pace, and I can be just under the speed of the flywheel and have zero power, zero force curve, because I'm going under the speed of the flywheel and I'm not affecting it, but I'm moving it. I'm doing all the right things, but I'm not moving the flywheel.
Yeah.
So at least indoors, you've got to move the flywheel. Outdoors, the on-water rowing coaches and any on-water rower will say, can you move a boat? And I'm all about, can you move the flywheel?
Yeah.
So, and moving the flywheel on the slides will help you more than moving the flywheel on a static erg when it comes to the boat, because the boat is very similar to the two collisions you get on the slides.
Yeah, so just developing that a little bit more. You talk passionately about slides rather than static. Do we just talk a bit more about that? You used an analogy, I can't remember, but when we were chatting before, about the kind of bounce that you get from the slide.
The bounce is the fun. I mean, let's backtrack. Like, if there was one primary reason to get on the slides versus the static, the number one injury amongst rowers is what? Lower back.
Yeah, back. Yeah.
Okay. That is the injury that shuts down rowers. The number one cause of lower back injuries in rowers is what? Not the boat, static erg.
Yeah.
Okay. So you say, okay, well, maybe there's a better, maybe shouldn't do the static. Maybe I should do the slides or the RP3. And that's what a lot of the top athletes have done, like the Sinkovich brothers. I saw an interview with them and they were like, oh my God, I'm so tired of having my back sore. I love rowing, but the sore back thing. So they convinced their coach to let them row on slides exclusively and not the static. Their backs got better. But the coach said, but once a year, you're doing a 2K on the static. And they're like, okay, we'll concede to that. But the rest of the year, we're on slides, not hurting our backs. And once a year, they throw down a 540 on the static. And the rest of the time, they're on slides. And you've got more mobility. It's metabolically more challenging at any given power output. You're going to have a higher oxygen uptake on the slides versus the static. It's two collisions versus one. The flywheel's coming into you. You're coming into, your body mass is coming into the flywheel. So you've got this bounce, this resonance, which it's not a muscular thing. It's a bounce thing. And you're using the elastic recoil of your joints, muscles, connective tissue to bounce in and out. If you think of a deadlift, how much bounce is there on a deadlift? None. It's pure muscle. Well, on the static, especially if you're coming in slowly or you're doing any indoor ergon at a slow rate, it's a muscle thing. It's a muscle. There's no bounce. Rowing is not a muscle thing. When you watch the best rowers, Robbie Manson, the Sinkovich brothers, the Kiwi pair, they bounce. They come in and out, in and out. And it's this resonance. That's where the magic is. The magic is not pull harder, muscle it. No magic. You watch the best runners. The best runners aren't muscular. It's bounce. It's all elastic energy. So the slides allow you to train more, train harder. It's twice the loading on the legs, half the loading on the lumbar spine. You're going to get a lot better at being elastic. It's bounce, and it's better for older bodies. What happens to older bodies? They get stiff.
Yeah.
And we tend to stop bouncing as we get older, and that just makes everything stiffer. And we want to do the bouncy dance. So every exercise I do has some element of bounce to it, some element of resonance, because that's where the magic is in any sport.
Yeah, I'm sitting here in my lower back throbbing, trying to look comfortable. It really resonates.
So everybody I've worked with, they have had some degree of lower back issues from the static. They get on the slides and like, oh my God, this is like a godsend. Yeah. Do I have to use the static anymore? I'm like, no. And I have people who I'm coaching who are going to the British Championships, which is static, or the crash. And they're doing maybe 60% of their training on the slides, depending on the time of year, 60 or 70% on slides, some on static, because you want the specific motor pattern that's going to happen when you race static. Yeah. But if you're not racing on a static, there's no reason at all to be rowing statically.
Yeah. Okay. Point well made. We're running out of time. Do you want to just tell us a bit about the Hardcore Training Center?
The Hardcore Training Center, we have a saying, how you train inside is how you live and perform outside. So we're all about doing the right things inside because most of us would much rather be outside. But we know that if we do the right things inside, six-dimensional movements, the six dimensions of fitness, we're going to function better outside. So we're doing all the right things to make bodies better, more functional, more robust, harder to kill. I remember this friend of mine, he was a chiropractor, and he had a shoulder surgery, and he was training really hard up until the night before his surgery. All leading up to the surgery, he was training really, really hard. And I'm like, I don't understand it. That doesn't really make sense to me. Why would you train hard before a surgery? So it turns out, after thinking about it more, and as we age, the higher the level you go into that surgery, the surgery is going to knock you down. But the higher the level you're at going into the surgery, the higher you're going to end up coming out of it. If you go into a surgery low fitness, low everything, you're almost dead coming out of it. Okay. You go into your 70s or 80s at a low level, and then you know you're going to get even lower. Not good. So you want to go into each year, each decade with as much fitness and movement and mobility. Aging is going to knock us down. It's going to happen. It's going to slow us down. But the higher you can keep yourself, keep all those six dimensions of fitness high, the less you're going to get knocked down decade to decade. So I'm hoping that when I'm 90, I'm still doing stuff. I'm still moving. I'm still hiking. I'm still biking. I'm still Nordic skiing, and I'm at a high level. But if you go into your 90s at a low level, it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Well, thank you, Bill. It's been very interesting. I'd love to have another conversation with you sometime. I just say to you one thing that we haven't discussed, but one of the benefits that I've picked up from some of your clients of working with you, and I've heard this phrase a couple of times, is having you in their corner. I know it's very valued. You help a lot of people.
Thank you very much. No, I'm happy to be have an influence in people getting better, and little accountability, a little love, and my knowledge and expertise and seeing people get better is what this is all about. So
yeah. Great. Thank you, Bill. Keep dancing. We'll talk again.
Thank you, Stefan. Cheers.
Bye.